So a couple weeks ago, I was working with a leader, awesome leader, smart lady, really wants to do well by her people, but is struggling on the leadership side of things. And I asked her what her goals were, and she actually looked at me and said, I want this organization to run like a machine. And I groaned. And for those of you who listen to my podcast a lot, you probably already know why. But I want to take some time today and really break down the difference between management and leadership and why it makes a difference. I am Dr. Melissa. It's so great to have you here with me today. This is the Empathic Leader. We are talking empathy, emotional intelligence, and leadership. And I would love for you to please subscribe, and pass this episode on to someone else that you think could use it. And even though we're going to talk leadership today, and we are pretty heavily entrenched in leadership, please, we are all leaders, even if we're only leaders of ourselves. And keep that in mind, that even some of the leadership stuff that we talk about here may not be immediately relevant to some people, but could be in the future. And definitely, even if the only person you're leading is yourself, it's important. Please, too, check out my book, The Empathic Leader, How EQ via Empathy Transforms Leadership for Better Profit, Productivity, and Innovation. We hit Amazon bestseller in the US, the UK, Canada, and Australia. And I was so excited to see it doing so well because it proves that people want to hear more about this subject. My TEDx also came out earlier this week, and we're already at 22,000 views. So check it all out. We will have links below. And let's talk a little bit more about empathy and leadership. So the first thing we have to keep in mind is that the idea of management, the way we have it now, goes way, way back. The word management comes out of an Italian word, managere, which means to be able to manage, to be able to handle, to be able to, put something in a place and make it do what you want it to do. It kind of comes, one of the things that I saw when I was looking this up is that it actually comes from what they would call these horse stables, but they weren't big stables. They were small containers, and they would put horses in there, and they would even have special bridles and horseware. I'm not a horsewoman. I don't know. But to make these horses do what they wanted them to do. So it wasn't just that they were managing them. They're forcing these animals to behave in a certain way. And that's really what it comes down to, is behavior. You think about the Vienna horses, and that they trot in a certain way, and they act in a certain way, and they behave in a certain way. When we hit the Industrial Revolution, they started getting this idea of the organization like a machine. And this starts with Henry Ford, and thinking that people should be able to just plug into this machine, right? Like cogs. I mean, how many times have you heard that? Oh, I just feel like a cog in a machine. That's where it comes from. That, this organism, you should just be able to plug things in and out, put people in and out. If a cog doesn't work or it's broken, you get rid of it. If things aren't working the way they should, or the machine isn't moving as smoothly as it should, then you go in and you fix it, right? The idea that people need to be fixed. So this idea of organizations moving like a machine, even though when people say it, what they mean is they want it to move smoothly, and they want it to move quickly, and they want it to be without problem. The thing is it doesn't take into account humanity, and that humans don't work well in that kind of an environment where you're just forced to be an input or an output, and it's click, 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 click. We don't operate like that. And I'm sure a lot of us probably have felt like a cog in the machine, And when you think about it, it's not a good feeling, right? Because you're replaceable, because you're just part of a bigger machine, because the efficiency is the goal, not innovation, not human connection, not empathy, right? A machine is mechanical, it's predictable, it's interchangeable, but it's also static. It doesn't change, it doesn't move. When we think of leadership, a machine doesn't actually need leadership. A machine just, once you start it, goes. So this is where we come back to a command and control style of leadership as well, which also came out of the Industrial Revolution, that you will do it my way, you will do what I say, and you will do it because I told you to do it. Humans don't work well in that way, and that's part of forcing those cogs into those spots and making them work the way you want. Well, the problem is if you have a piece of the machine that doesn't fit very well, it either breaks or it gets thrown out of the machine. Either way, it's not good. Organizations aren't a machine. Organizations are an organism. And here's why I say that. Machines do not evolve. Machines are not creative. Machines can't actually innovate. Organisms are made to grow. They're made to do better. They're made to, branch out and be more of what they are. As a leader, if you have vision and you want to be able to move your organization into the next 100 years, you don't want a machine, because machines just do the same thing. You want an organism that has the ability to grow and the ability to create and the ability to evolve. Machine doesn't evolve. Machine just clicks through. An organism will evolve to be able to meet the challenges of whatever's happening. You can replace a human gear, but you can't replace an entire organism that has the spark and the innovation and the creativity. And this is important. When you think about an organization as a machine, it stifles creativity, it stifles autonomy, it creates burnout, it creates resentment and turnover because people aren't machines. On the other hand, if as a leader you understand that this is an organism that can live and breathe and create, now you have something that can evolve and be something bigger and better and continue to move forward into the next century. I want to offer just a thought for my leaders out there, because a lot of us are brought up into the management style of things, right? It's hierarchical. It's our job to make sure this is running right. And a lot of people who get into those jobs don't get into those jobs because they are the best leaders. They get into those jobs because they're the best technicians, because they bring in the biggest contracts, because they have the biggest clients. But that doesn't necessarily make them great leaders. So here's your challenge. As leaders, think of your organization as an organism, like a human body. And like a human body, it's an organism that's made up of systems, right? Human body, you have the cardiovascular system, you have nervous system, gastric system, you have bones and you have skin and you have all these different things, but there's all these different things that work together to be able to make this organism work. And as the brain sends out signals to the rest of the organism sends those signals back, right? If you fall and you scrape your knee, you're sending signals to the brain saying this part of the system isn't working very well. If your stomach is upset, it goes back to the brain. If your heart stops working, it goes back to the brain pretty fast. The organism stops. So think about it instead of as a machine that's just click, 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 click. You're dealing with an organism with these interrelated systems. But because these systems are interrelated, or they should be, if you have an organism, that means it can grow, it can heal, and it can innovate and evolve. It's alive. It's adaptive and it's interconnected. Now, as a leader, wouldn't you rather have an organization that is interconnected and vibrant and alive? Think Apple with its innovations, rather than one that's stagnant and fails to make it into the innovation of the next century. Think buggy whip makers, right? Nobody's needed a buggy whip maker in the United States for a long time because they didn't evolve. They didn't adapt. When this happens, this idea, getting rid of this managerial idea of being a machine and moving into a leadership idea of it being an organism, the culture shifts from command and control to collaboration, because now you have these interconnected systems that are working together to make the organism thrive, as opposed to here's this chunk of machine and this chunk of machine and this chunk of machine. As a leader, that should be what you want. As a leader, if you're doing your job well, you're not really needed. Your job is vision. Your job is moving this organism ahead. Your job is seeing what's coming next. But you don't have to be involved in the day-to-day running. That's a manager's job. Let's think about this in terms of empathy now. Because empathy is about understanding and connection through understanding the perspective of others, right? Understanding this human system means understanding that the different systems are doing different things. It means understanding the humanness of this organism that's made up of all these people. It means having the perspective that a machine isn't going to work in this particular instance. Even though we're moving into more technology, AI, big tech, all of the stuff we talk about, the more we lean into these sorts of things in our organizations, the more we're going to have to lean into our humanity, at least for the people that are innovating and don't want to be the buggy whip makers of this century. The future of leadership is not mechanical. It's not even technological. It's organic and biological. If you're leading a team today, and as I talk about all the way through, there's no judgment. There's no, saying, oh, I should have done this better. There's only honest self-reflection and an understanding that, we can grow and learn and do better. Ask yourself, am I just managing a machine where it's inputs and outputs, inputs and outputs, inputs and outputs, or am I cultivating an organism? And I understand for those of you that are in middle management positions, director level positions, even VP, if the culture that your organization is giving you is one of machines, then you're trapped in the machine. And that makes it harder. But that doesn't mean you can't try to cultivate this idea within your own leadership practice, which you can then take on from there. Just to show my age, that makes me think of the Pink Floyd song, Welcome to the Machine, but neither here nor there. The point being that you don't want to be part of the machine. You want to be cultivating an organism, right? Organism. And what would happen if you saw your team as a living, breathing system, not just a process to control? That these are people that have more to do with inputs and outputs. Could you be able to help with employee attrition? Would you be able to build loyalty and goodwill? Can you help cultivate an organism that is going to be more than just the sum of its parts? Because at the end of the day, that's what a machine is. It's the sum of its parts. An organism is so much more, right? If you take a machine apart, you're going to have all its different parts. If you take a person apart, that's not going to show you the interrelation of the systems and how the cells work and how everything is put together. Plus, frankly, it's a throwback to an old idea. It's never too late to lead differently. And empathy can be learned, right? It's a skill, at least in part. Yeah, there's emotional empathy, which isn't learned as well, but there's also cognitive empathy, which would fall right into this understanding that organizations are more closely akin to organisms than they are to a machine. And let's be real. You are not a cog. You are a creator and a human being. You are something that can be more than the sum of your parts. And that goes for all of us. One thing I want to add, that doesn't mean there isn't a place for management. There's definitely a place for it. But it's not in the place of leadership where you want vision and forward motion. Leadership and management are two different things that play two different roles. And we have to understand the difference so we know which role we're playing. Just, if you haven't actually stopped and thought about it, that these two things are different, it would be worth taking a moment, thinking about your leadership style, and trying to understand how maybe you could change this to create an even better organism. Remember, 4 steps to self-empathy, and self-empathy comes before empathy, right? Self-observation, understanding what you're doing, taking a look at it without judgment, and kind of thinking about why you may be doing it. Self-reflection, turning the lens inward and reflecting on the action that happened and what might have caused it. Why are you leading like a manager? Probably because you were taught, probably because you were led by managers. Turning the lens outward to be self-aware and understand what you're doing and how that impacts the world. When you're leading like a manager instead of like a leader, how is this impacting your people? And finally leading to self-empathy. Understanding and connecting with yourself. I led like this because this is how I was taught, or this is what I saw, or this is what I thought I was supposed to do. But now I can take a moment, I can step back from that, and I can do better. I can be better, I can go farther, and I can create this organism that is so much more than the sum of its parts. And let's be real. I've quit jobs where I felt like a cog, where I felt I wasn't appreciated and I was just supposed to work like a machine. It didn't matter if I was sick. It didn't matter if my mom had died. It didn't matter what was going on in my life. I was just supposed to click through. And you know what? I left because I am not a cog and neither are you. And that goes for our leaders as well. Because if you're part of the machine, you're a cog too. Stop and think about it for a moment. Wouldn't it be better to build workplaces where we have that kind of organismistic collaboration? And the people who can actually get a hold of this through empathy and perspective taking, aren't they going to be the ones to lead us into the future? Thank you so much for joining me today. I am Dr. Melissa. This is the Empathic Leader. We talk all things emotional intelligence, empathy, and leadership. Please like, subscribe, and comment. Make sure you're following me. And I'm looking forward to bringing more empathy to you next week. And in the meantime, make sure you lead with a cool head and a warm heart.